Um, so chapter 5, on Night Street. Granny's mind was getting more and more muddled. Lena would come home in the evenings and find her rifling through kitchen cupboards, surrounded by cans and jars with their lids off, or tearing the covers off her bed and trying to lift up the mattress with her skinny arms. It was an important thing, she would say, the thing that was lost. But if you don't know what it was, said Lena, how will you know when you found it? Granny didn't try to answer this question. She just flapped her hands at Lena and said, never mind, never mind, never mind, and kept on searching. These days, Mrs. Murdo spent a great deal of time sitting by their window rather than her own. She would tell Granny she was just coming to her company, or she was just coming to keep her company. I don't want her to keep me company, Granny complained to Lena, and Lena said, maybe she's lonely, Granny, let her come. Lena rather liked having Mrs. Murdo around. It was a bit like having a mother there. She wasn't anything like Lena's own mother, who had been a dreamy, absent-minded sort of person. Mrs. Murdo was mother-like in quite a different way. She made sure they all ate a good breakfast in the morning, usually potatoes with mushroom gravy and beet tea. She lined up the vitamin pills by each person's plate and made sure they were swallowed. When Mrs. Murdo was there, shoes got picked up and put away, spills were wiped off the furniture, and Poppy always had on clean clothes. Lena could relax when Mrs. Murdo was around. She knew things were taken care of. Every week, Lena, like all workers between age 12 and age 15, had Thursday off. One Thursday, as she was standing in line at the Garden Square Market, hoping to get a bag of turnips for stew that night, she overheard a startling conversation between two people standing behind her. What I wanted, said one voice, was some paint for my front door. It hasn't been painted for years. It's gray and peeling. Horrible. I heard a store over on Night Street had some. I was hoping for blue. Blue would be nice, said the other voice wistfully. But when I got there, the first voice continued, the man said he had no paint, never had. Disagreeable man. All he had were a few colored pencils. Colored pencils? Lena had not seen colored pencils in any store for ages. Once she'd had 2 red ones, a blue one, and a brown one. She used these for her drawings until they were stubs too small to hold. Now she only had 1 plain pencil left, and it was rapidly growing shorter. She longed to have colored pencils for her pictures of the imaginary city. She had a feeling it was a colorful place, though she didn't know what colors it might be. There were other things, of course, on which money would be better spent. Granny's only coat was full of holes and coming apart at the seams. But Granny rarely went out, Lena told herself. She was either at home or in her yarn shop. She didn't really need a new coat, did she? Besides, how much could a few pencils cost? She could probably get a coat for Granny and some pencils. So that afternoon, she set out for Night Street. She took Poppy with her. Poppy had learned how to ride piggyback. She wrapped her legs around Lena's waist and gripped Lena's throat with her small, strong fingers. On Budlow Street, people were standing in long lines with their bundles of laundry at the washing stations. The washers stirred the clothes in the washing machines with long poles. In days past, the machines themselves had whirled the clothes around, but not one of them worked anymore. Lena turned up Hafter Street, where the 4 street lamps were still out and a building crew was repairing a partly collapsed roof. Orly Gordon called out to her from high on a ladder, and Lena looked up and waved. Farther on, she passed a woman with bits of rope and string for sale, and a man pulling a cart full of carrots and beets to the grocery stores. At the corner, a cluster of little children played catch with a rag ball. The streets were alive with people today. Moving fast, Lena threaded her way among them. But as she went into Otterwill Street, she saw something that made her slow down. A man was standing on the steps of the gathering hall, shouting and howling, and a crowd of people had gathered around him. Lena went closer, and when she saw who it was, her insides gave a lurch. It was Sag Merrill. His arms flailed wildly, and his eyes were stretched wide open. In a high, rapid voice, he wailed out a stream of words. I have been to the unknown regions, he cried. There is nothing, nothing, nothing there. Did you think something out there might save us? Ha! There's only darkness and monsters, darkness and terrible deep holes, darkness forever. The rats are the size of houses. The rocks are sharp as knives. The darkness sucks your breath out. No hope for us out there. Oh no. No hope. No hope. He went on like this for a few minutes and then crumpled to the ground. The people watched him, looked at each other, and shook their heads. Gone mad, Lena heard someone say. Yes, completely, said someone else. Suddenly, Sag sprang up again and resumed his terrible shouting. The crowd stepped back. Some of them hurried away. A few of them approached Sag, speaking in calming voices. They took him by the arms and led him, still shouting, down the steps. Who that? Who that? Said Poppy in her small, piercing voice. Lena turned away from the miserable spectacle. Hush, Poppy, she said. It's a poor, sad man. He doesn't feel good. We mustn't stare. She headed toward Night Street, which ran along Greengate Square. There, a stringy-haired man sat cross-legged on the ground, playing a flute made out of drain pipe, and 5 or 6 believers circled him, clapping and singing. Soon, soon, coming soon, they sang. What's coming soon? Lena wondered, but she didn't stop to ask. 2 blocks beyond, she came to a store that had no sign in its window. This must be the one, she thought. At first it looked closed. Its window was dark. But the door opened when she pushed on it, and a bell attached to its doorknob clinked. From the back room came a black-haired man with big teeth and a long neck. Yes, he said. Lena recognized him. He was the one who'd given her the message for the mayor on her very first day of work. His name was Hooper. No, Looper, that was it. Do you have pencils for sale? She asked. It seemed doubtful. The shop's shelves were empty except for a few stacks of used paper. Poppy squirmed on Lena's back and whimpered a little. Sometimes, said Looper. Poppy's whimper became a wail. All right, you can get down, Lena said to her. She set her on the floor where she tottered about unsteadily. What I'd like to see, said Lena, are your colored pencils, if you have any. We have a few, said Looper. They're somewhat expensive, he smiled, showing his pushy teeth. Could I see them? Said Lena. He went into the back room and returned a moment later, carrying a small box, which he set down on the counter. He took the lid off. Lena bent forward to look. Inside the box were at least a dozen colored pencils. Red, green, blue, yellow, purple, orange. They had never even been sharpened. Their ends were flat. They had erasers. Lena's heart gave a few fast beats. How much are they? She said. Probably too much for you, the man said. Probably not, said Lena. I have a job. Good, good, the man said, smiling again. No need to take offense. He picked up the yellow pencil and twirled it between his fingers. Each pencil, he said, $5. $5 for 7? You could buy a coat. It would be an old patched coat, but still warm. That's too much, Lena said. He shrugged and began to put the lid back on the box. But maybe, Lena's thoughts raced. Let me look at them again. Once more, the man lifted the lid and Lena bent over the pencils. She picked one up. It was painted a deep, clear blue, and on its flat top was the blue dot of the lead. The pink eraser was held on by a shiny metal collar. So beautiful. I could just buy one, Lena thought. Then I could save a little more and buy a coat for Granny next month. Make up your mind, said the man. I have other customers who are interested if you aren't. All right, I'll take one. No, wait. It was like a hunger, what she felt. It was the same as when her hand sometimes seemed to reach out by itself to grab a piece of food. It was too strong to resist. I'll take 2, she said, and a faint, dazzling feeling came over her at the thought of what she was doing. Which 2? The man said. There were more colors in that box of pencils than in all of Ember. Ember's colors were all so much the same. Gray buildings, gray streets, black sky, even the color of people's clothes were faded from long use into mud green and rust red and gray blue. But these colors, these were as bright as the leaves and flowers in the greenhouse. Lena's hand hovered over the pencils. The blue one, she said, and the yellow one. No, the man made an impatient noise in the back of his throat. The green one, said Lena. I'll take the blue and the green. She lifted them out of the box. She took the money from her pocket of her coat and handed it to the man, and she put the pencils in her pocket. They were hers now. She felt a fierce, defiant joy. She turned to go, and that was when she saw that the baby was no longer in the store. Poppy, she cried. She whirled around. Did you see my little sister go out? She asked the man. Did you see which way she went? He shrugged. Didn't notice, he said. Lena darted into the street and looked in both directions. She saw lots of people, some children, but no Poppy. She stopped an old woman. Have you seen a little girl, a baby, walking by herself, in a green jacket with a hood? The old woman just stared at her with dull eyes and shook her head. Poppy, Lena called. Poppy! Her voice rose to a shout. Such a little baby couldn't have gone far, she thought. Maybe down toward Greengate Square, where there were more people walking around? She began to run. And then the lights flickered, and flickered again, and went out. Darkness slammed up in front of her like a wall. She stumbled, caught herself, and stood still. She could see absolutely nothing. Shouts of alarm came from up and down the street, and then silence. Lena stretched her arms out. Was she facing the street or a building? Terror swept through her. I must just stand still, she thought. The lights will come on again in a few seconds. They always do. But she thought of Poppy alone in the blackness, and her legs went weak. I must find her. She took a step. When she didn't bump into anything, she took another step, and the fingers of her right hand crumpled against something hard. The wall of a building, she thought. Keeping her hand against it, she turned left a little and took another step forward. Then, suddenly, her hand touched empty air. This would be Deadlock Street. Or had she passed Deadlock Street already? She couldn't keep the picture of the streets clear in her mind. The darkness seemed to fill not just the city around her, but the inside of her head as well. Heart pounding, she waited. Come back, lights, she pleaded. Please come back. She wanted to call out to Poppy to tell her to stand still, to not be afraid. She would come for her soon. But the darkness pressed against her, and she couldn't summon her voice. She could hardly breathe. She wanted to claw the darkness away from her eyes, as if it were someone's hands. Small sounds came from here and there and around her, a whimpering, a shuffling. In the distance, someone called out incoherently. How many minutes had gone by? The longest blackout ever had been 3 minutes and 14 seconds. Surely this was longer. She could have endured it if she'd been on her own. It was the thought of Poppy lost that she couldn't stand. And lost because she had been paying more attention to a box of pencils. Oh, she'd been selfish and greedy, and now she was so sorry. She made herself take another step forward. But then she thought, what if I'm going away from Poppy? She began to tremble, and she felt the sinking and dissolving inside her that meant she was going to cry. Her legs gave way like wet paper, and she slid down until she was sitting on the street with her hand on her knees. Trembling, her mind a whirlless whirl of dread, she waited. An endless time went by. A moan came from somewhere to the left. A door slammed closed. Footsteps started, then stopped. Into Lena's mind floated the beginning of the worst question. What if the lights never... She squeezed her arms around her knees and made the question stop. Lights come back, she said to herself. Lights come back, come back. And suddenly they did. Lena sprang up. There was the street again, and people looking upward with their mouths hanging open. All around, people started crying or wailing or grinning in relief. Then all at once, everyone started to hurry, moving fast toward the safety of home in case it should happen again. Lena ran toward Greengate Square, stopped everyone she passed. Did you see a little girl walking by herself just before the lights went out? She asked. Green jacket with a hood? But no one wanted to listen to her. On the B Street side of the square stood a few people, all talking at once and waving their arms. Lena ran up to them and asked her question. They stopped talking and stared at her. How could we have seen anyone? The lights were out, said Nammy Proggs, a tiny old woman whose back was so bent she had to twist her head sideways to look up. Lena said, No, she wandered away before the lights went out. She got away from me. She may have come this direction. You have to keep your eye on a baby, Nammy Proggs scolded. Babies need watching, said one of the women who'd been singing with the Believers. But someone else said, Oh, a toddler, green jacket? And he walked over to an open shop door and called, You have that baby in there? And through the door came someone leading Poppy by the hand. Lena dashed to her and lifted her up. Poppy broke into loud wails. You're all right now, said Lena, holding her tightly. Don't worry, sweetie. You were just lost a moment. Now you're all right. I've got you, don't worry. When she looked up to thank the person who'd found her, she saw a face she recognized. It was Dune. He looked the same as when she'd last seen him, except that his hair was shaggier. He had on the same baggy brown jacket he always wore. She was marching up the street by herself, he said. No one knew who she belonged to, so I took her into my father's shop. She belongs to me, Lena said. She's my sister. I was so afraid when she was lost, I thought she might fall and hurt herself, or be knocked over, or... Anyway, thank you so much for rescuing her. Anyone would have, said Dune. He frowned and looked down at the pavement. Poppy had calmed down and was curled up against Lena's chest with her thumb in her mouth. And your job, how is it? Lena asked. The pipe works? Dune shrugged his shoulders. All right, he said. Interesting, anyway. She waited, but it seemed that was all he was going to say. Well, thank you again, she said. She hoisted Poppy around to her back. Lucky for you, Don Hera was around, said Nammy Proggs, who'd been watching them with her sideways glare. He's a good-hearted boy. Anything breaks at my house, he fixes it. She hobbled after Lena, shaking a finger at her. You'd better watch that baby more carefully, she called. You shouldn't leave her alone, the flute player added. I know, said Lena, you're right. When she got home, she put the tired baby to bed in the bedroom they shared. Granny had been taking an afternoon nap in the front room and hadn't noticed the blackout at all. Lena told her that the lights had gone out for a few minutes, but she didn't mention anything about Poppy getting lost. Later, in her bedroom with Poppy asleep, she took the 2 colored pencils from her pocket. They were not quite as beautiful as they had been. When she held them, she remembered the powerful wanting she had felt in that dusty store, and the feeling of it was mixed up with fear and shame and darkness. End of chapter 5. Okay. Let's see. Car, hello, welcome in. Happy Friday, Car. How are you doing? Me listening to Darkness and No Hope, like so cozy. The baby woke up. Have a nice read. Oh no. Hopefully the baby's okay. Thank you for being here. I just took a little hydrate break. I swept through her terror. Welcome in. Happy Friday. You did. Welcome in, Nettie. Hello. Happy Friday, everybody. How are you all doing? Thank you for the claps for chapter 5. We finished a whole chapter. Heck yes. We're doing pretty good. My head still hurts, but it's okay. We're still going. I hope everybody's been having a good week so far and a good Friday. Hope you're well today. I'm doing okay. If my head wasn't hurting so badly, I would be better, but doing okay. Doing ever so better for being here. Heck yes, Nettie. Thank you for being here. Let me see if anyone else snuck in. I don't think so. Okay. But thank you all for being here. I hope, like I said, I hope you're having a good day. You have such a nice, good reading voice. Thank you. Thank you. I like reading, and I feel like it puts people to sleep. Anytime I ever tried to read to Matt, he would fall asleep. But I think that's kind of a good thing. I think it's a good thing. So anything cozy is fine with me. So it's all good. Midge is sound asleep on me now. Aw, that's so cute. I wish Luna was here. She would make me feel better. I posted a picture of us listening on my couch in your Discord. Oh, I'll have to look. Wait a minute. Let me look. Oh, Midge is so cute. Midge is so cute. Aw. So she's laying on you. That's so fun. I love when cats lay on you. It's like, and then you just feel them like purring and just vibrating, and it's like the cutest. I don't know. I think it's the cutest thing. I love it. All right. I'm going to take one more little hydrate break, and then we'll start chapter 6. Trying to find a good spot for my mic too. Okay. Chapter 6, The Box in the Closet. It was strange how people didn't talk much about the blackout. Power failures usually arouse lively discussion, with clumps of people collecting on corners and saying to each other, "Where were you when it happened? And what's the matter with the electricians? We should kick them out and get new ones," and that sort of thing. This time, it was just the opposite. When Lena went to work the next morning, the street was oddly silent. People walked quickly, their eyes on the ground. Those who did stop to talk spoke in low voices, then hurried on their way. That day, Lena carried the same message 12 times. All the messengers were carrying it. It was simply this: being passed from one person to another. 7 minutes. The power failure had been more than twice as long as any other so far. Fear had settled over the city. Lena felt it like a cold chill. She understood now that Dune had been speaking the truth on assignment day. Ember was in grave danger. The next day, a notice appeared on all the city's kiosks. Town meeting. All citizens are requested to assemble in Harkin Square at 6 p.m. tomorrow to receive important information from Mayor Lamander Cole. What kind of important information, Lena wondered? Good news or bad? She was impatient to hear it. The next day, people streamed into Harkin Square from all 4 directions, crowding together so close that each person hardly had room to move. Children sat on the shoulders of fathers. Short people tried to push toward the front. Lena spotted Lizzie and called a greeting to her. She saw Vindy Chance, too, who had brought her little brother. Lena had decided to leave Poppy at home with Granny. There was too much danger of losing her in a crowd like this. The town clock began to strike. 6 vibrating bongs rang out, and a murmur of anticipation swept through the crowd. People stood on tiptoe, craning to see. The door of the gathering hall opened, and the mayor came out, flanked by 2 guards. One of the guards handed the mayor a megaphone, and the mayor began to speak. His voice came through the megaphone both blurry and crackly. "People of Ember," he said. He waited. The crowd fell silent, straining to hear. "People of Ember," the mayor said again. He looked from side to side. The light glinted off his bald head. "Our city has experienced some slight difficulty. Some slight difficulty lately. Times like this require grush pushin frushall." "What did he say?" People whispered urgently. "What did he say? I couldn't hear him." "Slight difficulties," someone said, "requires great patience from us all." "But I stand here today," the mayor went on, "to reassure you, difficult times will pass. We are What? Came the sharp whisper. What did he say? Those near the front password back. "Making every effort," they said. "Every effort." "Louder," someone shouted. The mayor's voice blared through the megaphone, louder but even less clear. Worsh pashuling, he said. Pank, mush and pank, no rush and pank. We can't hear you, someone yelled. Lena felt a stirring around her, a muttering. Someone pushed against her back, forcing her forward. He said, we mustn't panic, someone said. He said, panic is the worst possible thing. No reason to panic, he said. On the steps of the gathering hall, the 2 guards moved a little closer to the mayor. He raised the megaphone and spoke again. Schlutions, he bellowed. Arbingfun. Solutions, the front people said, and called to the back. Solutions are being found, he said. What solutions? Called a woman standing near Lena. People elsewhere in the crowd echoed what the woman had said. What solutions? What solutions? Their cry became a chorus, louder and louder. Again, Lena felt the pressure from people behind her as they moved forward and toward the gathering hall. Jostling arms poked her, bulky bodies bumped her and crushed her. Her heart began to pound. I have to get out of here, she thought. She started ducking beneath arms and darting into whatever space she could find, making her way toward the rear of the crowd. Noise was rising everywhere. The mayor's voice kept coming in blasts of incomprehensible sound, and the people in the crowd were either shouting angrily or yelping in fear of being squashed. Someone stepped on Lena's foot and her scarf was half yanked off. For a few seconds, she was afraid if she was going to be trampled. But at last, she struggled free and ran up onto the steps of the school. From there, she saw that the 2 guards were hustling the mayor back through the door of the gathering hall. The crowd roared, and a few people started hurling whatever they could find, pebbles, garbage, crumpled paper, even their own hats. At the other side of the square, Dune and his father battled their way down Gilly Street. Move fast, his father said. We don't want to be caught up in this crowd. They crossed Broad Street and took the long way home, through the narrow lanes behind the school. Father, said Dune as they hurried along, the mayor's a fool, don't you think? For a moment, his father didn't answer. Then he said, He's in a tough spot, son. What would you have him do? Not lie, at least, Dune said. If he really has a solution, he should have told us. He shouldn't pretend he has solutions when he doesn't. Dune's father smiled. That would be a good start, he agreed. It makes me so angry the way he talks to us, said Dune. Dune's father put a hand on Dune's back and steered him toward the corner. A great many things make you angry lately, he said. For good reason, said Dune. Maybe. The trouble with anger is it gets hold of you, and then you aren't the master of yourself anymore. Anger is. Dune walked on silently. Inwardly, he groaned. He knew what his father was going to say, and he didn't feel like hearing it. And when anger is the boss, you get, I know, said Dune, unintended consequences. That's right, like hitting your father in the ear with a shoe heel. I didn't mean to. That's exactly my point. They walked on down Pibb Street. Dune shoved his hands into his pockets of his jacket and scowled at the sidewalk. Father doesn't even have a temper, he thought. He's as mild as a glass of water. He can't possibly understand. Lena was running. She'd already dismissed the mayor's speech from her mind. She sped by people on Otterwell Street going back to open their stores and overheard snatches of conversation as she passed. Expects us to believe, said one voice. He's just trying to keep us quiet, said another. Heading for disaster, said a third. All the voices shook with anger and fear. Lena didn't even want to think about it. Her feet slapped the stones of the street, her hair flew out behind her. She would go home. She would make hot potato soup for the 3 of them, and then she would take out her new pencils and draw. She climbed the stairs next to the yarn shop 2 at a time and burst through the door of the apartment. Something was on the floor just in front of her feet, and she tripped and fell down hard on her hands and knees. She stared. By the open closet door was a great pile of coats and boots and bags and boxes, their contents all spilled out and tangled up. A thumping and rattling came from inside the closet. Granny? More thumps. Granny's head poked around the edge of the closet door. I should have looked in here a long time ago, she said. This is where it would be, of course. You should see what's in here. Lena gazed around at the incredible mess. Into this closet had been packed the junk of decades, jammed into cardboard boxes, stuffed into old pillowcases and laundry bags, and heaped up in a pile so dense you couldn't pull one thing out without pulling all the rest with it. The shelf above the coat rack was just as crammed as the space below, mostly with old clothes that were full of moth holes and eaten away by mildew. When she was younger, Lena had tried exploring in this closet, but she never got far. She'd pulled out an old scarf that would fall to pieces in her hands, or open a box that proved to be full of bent carpet tacks. Soon, she would shove everything back in and give up. But Granny was really doing the job right. She grunted and panted as she wrenched free the closet's packed-in stuff and tossed it behind her. It was clear she was having fun. As Lena watched, a bag of rags came tumbling out the door, and then an old brown shoe with no laces. "Granny," said Lena, suddenly uneasy, "where's the baby?" "Oh, she's here," came Granny's voice from the depths of the closet. "She's been helping me." Lena got up from the floor and looked around. She soon spotted Poppy. She was sitting behind the couch in the midst of the clutter. In front of her was a small box made of something dark and shiny. It had a hinged lid, and the lid was open, hanging backward. "Poppy," said Lena, "let me see that." She stooped down. There was some sort of mechanism on the edge of the lid, a kind of lock, Lena thought. The box was beautifully made, but it had been damaged. There were dents and scratches in its hard, smooth surface. It looked as if it had been a container for something valuable, but the box was empty now. Lena picked it up and felt around in it to be sure. There was nothing inside at all. "Was there something in this box, Poppy? Did you find something in here?" But Poppy only chortled happily. She was chewing on some crumpled paper. She had paper in her hands, too, and was tearing it. Shreds of paper were strewn around her. Lena picked one up. It was covered with small, perfect printing. End of chapter 6. Thank you for linking Discord. I love the Midge picture. Honestly, I really love looking at pet pictures. So those are usually some of my favorite ones to see. I love when people post their little animals in there. It's really fun. Let me see. Oh my gosh, and we have food too. We have cookies. Oh my goodness. Food, I can't even look at food right now. I'm getting hungry already. I'm getting hungry just looking at it. And I think it'll be a little while before I have dinner anyway. So I need to wait. But I hope everybody is enjoying the story so far. I can't wait to see what was inside the box, even though I already know what was inside the box. And if you remember from the last stream, I think you guys might remember what is in the box as well. So are we ready? Oh my gosh, I can't even speak today. I'm having a hard time. Are we ready for chapter 7? I think I am, because I would like to know what was in that box that Poppy found. Okay, here we go. Chapter 7, A Message Full of Holes. It was the printing that sparked Lena's curiosity. It was not handwriting, or if it was the neatest, most regular handwriting she had ever seen. It was more like the letters printed on cans of food or along the sides of pencils. Something other than a hand had written those words. A machine of some kind. This was the writing of the builders. And so this piece of paper must have come from the builders too. Lena gathered up the scraps of paper from the floor and gently pried open Poppy's fists and mouth to extract the crumpled wads. She put all this into the dented box and carried it to her room. That evening, Granny and the baby were both asleep by a little after 8. Lena had nearly an hour to examine her discovery. She took the scraps from the box and spread them out on the table in her bedroom. The paper was thick, At each torn edge was a fringe of tangled fibers. There were many little pieces and one big piece with so many holes that it was like lace. The chewed bits were beyond saving. They were almost a paste. But Lena spread out the big lacy piece and saw that on one edge of it, which was still intact, was a column of numbers. She collected all the dry scraps and puzzled over them for a long time, trying to figure out where they fit into the larger piece. When she had arranged them all as well as she could, this was what she had. Egress, this office, doc, instric, secure, period of, ears, prepara, made for, inha, city, as fall, 1, exp, riv, ip, orc, 2, stun marked with E by R, J, 3, add, down, iverb, ink, to edge, upper, 8, low, 4, axe to the, what are, fine door of bow, cur key, hind small steel, pan the right, rem, e open, do, 5, oat, stocked with, neck, whipn't, back, unt, eat, 6, oosie, opes, low, stir, head doused, us pa, avx, and assist, over wrap, 7, approx 3 hours, decem, follow, pat. Lena could make sense of only a few words here and there. Even so, something about this tattered document was exciting. It was not like anything Lena had ever seen. She stared at the very first word at the top of the page, instru, and she suddenly knew what it must be. She'd seen it often enough at school. It had to be the beginning of the instructions. Her heart began knocking at her chest like a fist on a door. She had found something. She had found something strange and important. Instructions for something, but for what? And how terrible that Poppy had found it first and ruined it. It occurred to Lena that this might be what her grandmother had been talking about for so long. Perhaps this was the thing that was lost. But of course, not knowing what had been lost, Granny wouldn't have recognized the box when she saw it. She would have tossed it out of the closet just as carelessly as she tossed everything else. Anyhow, it didn't matter whether this was the thing or not the thing. It was a mystery in itself, whatever it was, and Lena was determined to solve it. The first step was to stick the scraps of paper down. They were so light that a breath could scatter them. She had a little bit of glue left in an old bottle. Painstakingly, she put a dot of glue on each of the scraps and pressed each one into its place on one of her precious few remaining whole sheets of paper. She put another piece of paper on top of this and set the box on top to flatten everything down. Just as she finished, the lights went out. She'd forgotten to keep an eye on the clock on her windowsill. She had to undress and get in bed in the dark. She was too excited to sleep much that night. Her mind whirled around, trying to think what the message she found might be. She felt sure it had something to do with saving the city. What if these instructions were for fixing the electricity? Or for making a movable light? That would change everything. When the lights went on in the morning, she had a few minutes before Poppy wakened to work at the puzzle. But there were so many words missing. How could she ever make sense of such a jumble? As she pulled on her red jacket and tied the frayed and knotted laces of her shoes, she thought about it. If the paper was important, she shouldn't keep it to herself. But who could she tell? Maybe the messenger captain? She would know about things like official documents. Captain Fleary, Lena said when she got to work, would you have time to come home with me later on today, just for a minute? I found something I'd like to show you. Found what? Asked Captain Fleary. Some paper with writing on it. I think it might be important. Captain Fleary raised her skinny eyebrows. What do you mean important? Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't, but would you look at it anyway? So that evening, Captain Fleary came home with Lena and peered at the bits of paper. She bent down and inspected the writing. Fall, she said. Axe, rem, aunt? What kinds of words are those? I don't know, said Lena. The words are all broken up because Poppy chewed on them. I see, said Captain Fleary. She poked at the paper. This looks like instructions for something, she said. A recipe, I suppose? Small steel pan? That would be what you'd use to cook it with. But who would have such a small, perfect writing? That's the way they wrote in the old days, said Captain Fleary. It could be a very old recipe. But then why would it have been kept in this beautiful box? She showed the box to Captain Fleary. I think it was locked up in here for some reason, and you wouldn't lock up something unless it was important. But Captain Fleary didn't seem to have heard her. Or, she said, it could be a school exercise. Someone's homework that never got turned in. But have you ever seen paper like this? Doesn't it look as if it came from someplace else, not here? Captain Fleary straightened up. A look of puzzlement came over her face. There is nowhere but here, she said. She put both her hands on Lena's shoulders. You, my dear, are letting your imagination run away with you. Are you overtired, Lena? Are you anxious? I could put you on short days for a while. No, said Lena, I'm fine, I am. But I don't know what to do about... She gestured toward the paper. Never mind, said Captain Fleary. Don't think about it. Throw it away. You're worrying too much. I know. We all are. There's so much to worry about, but we mustn't let it unsettle us. She gave Lena a long look. Her eyes were the color of dishwater. Help is coming, she said. Help? Yes, coming to save us. Who is? Captain Fleary bent down and lowered her voice, as if telling a secret. Who built our city, dear? The builders, said Lena. That's right, and the builders will come again and show us the way. They will? Very soon, said Captain Fleary. How do you know? Captain Fleary straightened up again and clapped a hand over her heart. I know it here, she said, and I have seen it in a dream. So have all of us, all the believers. So that's what they believe, Lena thought, and Captain Fleary is one of them. She wondered how the captain could feel so sure about it just because she'd seen it in a dream. Maybe it was the same for her as the sparkling city was for Lena. She wanted it to be true. The captain's face lit up. I know what you must do, dear. Come to one of our meetings. It would lift your heart. We sing. Oh, said Lena, thank you, but I'm not sure Maybe sometime. She tried to be polite, but she knew she wouldn't go. She didn't want to stand around waiting for the builders. She had other things to do. Captain Fleary patted her arm. No pressure, dear, she said. If you change your mind, let me know. But take my advice. Forget about your little puzzle project. Lie down and take a nap. It clears the mind. Her narrow face beamed kindness down at Lena. You take tomorrow off, she said. She raised a hand goodbye and went down the stairs. Lena took advantage of her day off to go to the supply depot to see Lizzie Biscoe. Lizzie was quick and smart. She might have some good ideas. At the supply depot, crowds of shopkeepers stood in long, disorderly lines that stretched out to the door. They pushed and jostled and snapped impatiently at each other. Lena joined them, but they seemed so frantic that they frightened her a little. They must be very sure now that the supplies are running out, she thought, and they're determined to get what they can before it's too late. When she got close to the head of the line, she heard the same conversation several times. Sorry, the clerk would say when a shopkeeper asked for 10 packets of sewing needles, or a dozen drinking glasses, or 20 packages of light bulbs. There's a severe shortage of that item. You can only have one. Or else the clerk would say, sorry, we're out of that entirely. Forever? Forever. Lena knew that it hadn't always been this way. When Ember was a young city, the storerooms were full. They held everything the citizens would want. So much it seemed that the supplies would never run out. Lena's grandmother had told her that school children were given a tour of the storerooms as part of their education. They took an elevator from the street level to a long, curving tunnel with doors on both sides and other tunnels branching off of it. The guide led the tour down the long passages, opening one door after another. This area, he would say, is canned goods. Next, we come to school supplies, and around this bend, we have kitchenware. Next come carpentry tools. At each door, the children crowded against each other to see. Every room had something different, Granny told Lena. Boxes of toothpaste in one room, bottles of cooking oil, bars of soap, boxes of pills. There were 20 rooms just for vitamin pills. One room was stacked with hundreds of cans of fruit. There was something called pineapple. I remember that one especially. What was pineapple? Asked Lena. It was yellow and sweet, said Granny with a dreamy look in her eyes. I had it 4 times before we ran out of it. But these tours had been discontinued long before Lena was born. The storerooms, people said, were no longer a pleasure to look at. Their dusty shelves stood mostly empty now. It was rumored that in some rooms nothing was left at all. A child seeing the rooms where powdered milk had been stored, or the rooms that stored bandages or socks or pins or notebooks, or, most of all, the dozens of rooms that had once held thousands of light bulbs, would not feel as earlier generations of children had, that Ember was endlessly rich. Today's children, if they were to tour the storerooms, would feel afraid. Thinking about all this, Lena waited in line of people at Lizzie's station. When she got to the front, she leaned forward with her elbows on the counter and whispered, "Lizzie, can you meet me after you're through with work? I'll wait for you right outside the door." Lizzie nodded eagerly. At 4 o'clock, Lizzie came trotting out of the office door. Lena said to her, "Will you come home with me for a minute? I want to show you something." "Sure," said Lizzie, and they walked. Lizzie talked. "My wrist is killing me from writing all day," she said. "You have to write in the tiniest letters to save paper, so I get a terrible cramp in my wrist and my fingers, and people are so rude. Today they were worse than ever. I said to some guy, 'You can't have 15 cans of corn. You can only have 3. And he said, 'Look, don't tell me that. I saw plenty of cans in the Pot Street Market just yesterday.' And I said, 'Well, that's why there aren't so many left today.' And he said, 'Don't be smart with me, Carrot Head.' But what am I supposed to do? I can't make cans of corn out of thin air." They passed through Harkin Square, around the gathering hall, and down Roving Street, where 3 of the floodlights were out, making a cave of shadow. "Lizzie," said Lena, interrupting the flow of talk, "is it true about the light bulbs?" "Is what true? That there aren't many left?" Lizzie shrugged. "I don't know. They hardly ever let us go downstairs into the storerooms. All we see are the reports the carriers turn in. How many forks are in room 1146? How many doorknobs in 3291? How many children's shoes in 2249? But when you see the report for the light bulb rooms, what does it say?" "I never get to see that one," said Lizzie. "That one and a few other ones like the vitamin report, only a few people can see." "Who?" "Oh, the mayor, and of course old Flabface." Lena looked at her questioningly. "You know, Farlow Batten, the head of the storerooms. He is so mean, Lena, you would just hate him. He counts us late if we come in even 2 minutes after 8, and he looks over our shoulders as we're writing, which is awful because he has bad breath, and he runs his fingers over what we've written and says, 'This word is illegible. That word is illegible. These numbers are illegible.' It's his favorite word, illegible." When they came to Lena Street, Lena ducked her head in the door of the yarn shop and said hello to Granny, and then they climbed the stairs to the apartment. Lizzie was talking about how hard it was to stand up all day, how it made her knees ache, how her shoes pinched her feet. She stopped talking long enough to say hello to Eveline Murdo, who was sitting by the window with Poppy on her lap, and then she began again as Lena led her into her bedroom. "Lena, where were you when the big blackout came?" she asked. But she went right on without waiting for an answer. "I was at home, luckily, but it was scary, wasn't it?" Lena nodded. She didn't want to talk about what happened that day. "I hate those blackouts," Lizzie went on. "People say there are going to be more and more of them, and that someday—" She stopped, frowned, and started again. "Anyway, nothing bad happened to me. After that, I got up and figured out a whole new way to do my hair. It seemed to Lena that Lizzie was like a clock wound too tightly and running too fast. She'd always been a little this way, but today was more so than ever. Her gaze skipped from one spot to another, her fingers twiddled with the edge of her shirt. She looked paler than usual, too. Her freckles stood out like little smudges of dirt on her nose. "Lizzie," said Lena, beckoning toward the table in the corner of her room, "I want to show you." But Lizzie wasn't listening. "You're so lucky to be a messenger, Lena," she said. "Isn't it fun? I wish I could have been one. I would have been so good at it. My job is so boring." Lena turned and looked at her. "Isn't there anything you like about it?" Lizzie pursed her lips in a tiny smile and looked sideways at Lena. "There is one thing," she said. "What?" "I can't tell you. It's a secret." "Oh," said Lena. "Then you shouldn't have mentioned it at all," she thought. "Maybe I'll tell you someday," said Lizzie. "I don't know." "Well, I like my job," Lena said. "But what I wanted to talk to you about was what I found yesterday. It's this." She lifted the box away and took up the piece of paper covering the patched-together document. Lizzie gave it a quick look. "Is it a message someone gave you that got torn up?" "No, it was in our closet. Poppy was chewing on it. That's why it's torn up." "But look at the writing on it. Isn't it strange?" "Uh-huh," said Lizzie. "You know who has beautiful handwriting? Mila Bone, who works with me. You should see it. It's got curly tails on the Y's and G's and fancy loops on the capital letters. Of course, Flabface hates it. He says it's illegible." Lena slid the piece of paper back over the pasted-down scraps. She wondered why she had thought Lizzie would be interested in what she found. She always had fun with Lizzie, but their fun was usually with games, hide and seek, tag, the kinds of games where you run and climb. Lizzie never had been much interested in anything that was written on paper. So Lena quietly put the document back in its place, and she sat down with Lizzie on the floor. She listened and listened until Lizzie's chatter ran down. "I'd better go," Lizzie said. "It was fun to see you, Lena. I miss you." She stood up. She fluffed her hair. "What was it you wanted to show me?" "Oh, yeah, the fancy writing. Really nice. Lucky you to find it. Come and see me again soon, all right? I get so bored in that office." Lena made beet soup for dinner that night, and Poppy spilled hers and made a red lake on the table. Granny stared into her bowl, stirring and stirring the soup with her spoon, but she didn't eat. She didn't feel quite right, she told Lena. After a while, she wandered off to bed. Lena cleaned up the kitchen quickly. As soon as her chores were out of the way, she could get back to studying her document. She washed Poppy's clothes. She sewed on the buttons that had come off her messenger jacket. She picked up the rags and sacks and boxes and bags that Granny had tossed out of the closet, and by the time she had done all this, she put Poppy to bed. She still had almost half an hour to study the fragments of paper. She sat down at her desk and uncovered the document. With her elbows on either side of it and her chin resting in her hands, she pored over it. Though Lizzie and Captain Fleary had paid it no attention, Lizzie still thought this torn-up page must be important. Why else would it have been in such a cleverly fastened box? Maybe she should show it to the mayor, she thought reluctantly. She didn't like the mayor. She didn't trust him either. But if this document was important to the future of the city, he was the one who should know about it. Of course, she couldn't ask the mayor to come to her house. She pictured him puffing up the stairs, squeezing through the door, looking disapprovingly at the clutter in their house, recoiling from Poppy's sticky hands. No. It wouldn't do. But she didn't want to take her carefully patched together document to the gathering hall either. It was just too fragile. The best thing to do, she decided, was to write the mayor a note. She settled down to do this. She found a fairly unspoiled half piece of paper, and using a plain pencil, she wasn't going to waste her colored ones on the mayor, she wrote, "Dear Mayor Cole, I have discovered a document that was in the closet. It is instructions for something. I believe it is important because it is written in very old printing. Unfortunately, it got chewed up by my sister, so it is not all there. But you can still read bits of it, such as marked with E, find door of bow, small steel pan. I will show you this document if you want to see it. Sincerely yours, Lena Mayfleet, Messenger, 34 Quilliam Square." She folded the note in half and wrote Mayor Cole on the front. On her way to work the next morning, she took it to the gathering hall. No one was sitting at the guard's desk, so Lena left the note there, placed so that the guard would see it when he arrived. Then, feeling that she had done her duty, she went off to her station. Several days went by. The messages Lena carried were full of worry and fear. Do you have any extra baby drink? I can't find it at the store. Have you heard what they were saying about the generator? We can't come tonight. Grandpa B won't get out of bed. Every day when she got home from work, Lena asked Granny, "Did a message come for me?" But there was nothing. Maybe the mayor hadn't gotten her note. Maybe he'd gotten it and paid no attention. After a week, Lena decided she was tired of waiting. If the mayor wasn't interested in what she'd found, too bad for him. She was interested. She would figure it out herself. Twice during the week, when Poppy and Granny were both asleep, she'd had a little free time. She'd spent this time making a copy of the document just in case anything happened to the fragile original. It had taken her a long time. She used one of her few remaining pieces of paper, an old label, slightly torn, from a can of peas. The copy was as accurate as she could make it, with the missing bits between the letters carefully indicated as dashes. She had tucked it under the mattress of her bed for safekeeping. Now, she finally had a whole free evening. Poppy and Granny were both asleep, and the apartment was tidy. Lena sat down at her table and uncovered the patched-together document. She tied back her hair so it wouldn't keep falling in her face, and she put a piece of paper next to her, blank except for a little bit of Poppy's scribbling, to write down what she decoded. She started with the title. The first word she'd already figured out. It had to be instructions. The next word could be for. Then came egress. She wasn't sure what that was about. Maybe it was someone's name? Egressman? Eggerston? Instructions for Eggerston? She decided to call it the instructions for short. She went on to the first line. This office doc. Probably meant this official document. Maybe secure meant secure or security? Then there were the words period and ears and city. But after that, so much was missing. She studied the line next to the number 1. Exp. That could be expect or expert or so many things. She moved on to riv. That might be part of a word like drive or strive. What could ip and orc possibly be, though? They were so close together, maybe they were part of one word? What ended with ip? Whip, Lena thought? Trip? Slip? What ended with orc? Fork came to mind immediately. Trip fork? Slip fork? Nothing she could think of made sense. Maybe it wasn't fork. What else ended in orc? Starting at the beginning of the alphabet, Lena went through all the words that rhymed with fork. Most of them were nonsense. Bork, dork, gork, hork, jork. This isn't going to work, she thought miserably. Oh, work. The word could be work. Then what would the first part be? Trip work? Flip work? But maybe there was a letter between the P and the W? Dips work? Pips work? Suddenly it came to her. Pipeworks. Pipeworks. That had to be it. Something in this message was about the pipeworks. Lena looked back at exp and riv. Riv. That could be river. Rapidly, she ran her eyes down the page. In line 3, she saw iverb ink. That looked like riverbank. The word door jumped out at her from line 4. Hole on its scrap of piece of paper. Lena took a quick breath. A door. What if it was the one she'd wished for? The one that led to the other city? Maybe her city was real after all, and these were instructions for finding it. She wanted to leap from her chair and shout. The message had to do with the river, a door, and the pipeworks. And who did she know who knew about the pipeworks? Dune, of course. She pictured his thin, serious face and his eyes looking out searchingly from beneath his dark eyebrows. She pictured how he used to bend over his work at school, holding his pencil in a hard grip, and how, during free time, he was usually off by himself in a corner studying a moth or a worm or a taken-apart clock. That was one thing, at least, that she liked about Dune. He was curious. He paid attention to things, and he cared about things too. She remembered how he'd been on assignment day, so furious at the mayor, so eager to trade his job for her bad one so that he could help save the city. And he'd taken Poppy inside his father's shop on the day of the blackout so that she wouldn't be afraid. Why had she stopped being friends with June? She vaguely recalled the incident of the light pole. It seemed silly now and long ago. The more she thought about June, the more it seemed he was the very person, the only person, who might be interested in what she'd found. She placed the plain sheet of paper over the instructions and put the box on top. I'll go and find June, she thought. Tomorrow was Thursday, their day off. She would find him tomorrow and ask for his help. End of chapter 7. Welcome in, Misty. Happy Friday. I hope you're having a good day so far. Making some dinner, but still here. What are you making for dinner? What are you making for dinner? I need to figure out what I'm going to have for dinner soon. ASMR reading. Yes. Save me some leftovers. Page turning ASMR is on point. Oh my God. Can you actually hear the pages turning? I didn't know if you could hear that. Hang on. I need to clean my glasses really quick. I am wearing my glasses currently. And they're getting kind of smudged. I could listen to this all day. I wish I could read all day, but I think I would lose my voice if I tried to. Because I can already feel it, like, especially since I have allergies. I did take my allergy pill today, but I can really feel it, like, working its allergy stuffs, which is kind of yucky. Thank you for claps for chapter 7. It's so relaxing. I love reading to people. Like, most people don't like when I read to them, but I love reading to people. So I hope you guys like it. I get that way when I read to my kid for like 20 minutes. Oh my goodness, Misty. I love it. I wish I could just read forever because I feel like it's relaxing to read out loud. I think it is actually helping my headache, not gonna lie. You are gonna love my reading to you, calling to others. Listen, if you knew how many times I ask Matt, can I read to you? And he always says no. He always says no. And even when he's like, I need something to do to fall asleep, I'm like, I'll read to you because I know you'll fall asleep because people always fall asleep. Uh-oh, Tara got some butt spot. You butt gonna love butt rebut to you. It's so relaxing. I fell asleep a couple times. Heck yes, Coco. Colie, you can read me to sleep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And luckily, I am going to be putting these recordings on YouTube. The first one is going to be up next week because it'll be off Twitch. And I did trim off the beginning and end where I just have like the starting soon and like the music so that it would be more of just like the reading. So hopefully if you do follow my YouTube channel, you can leave a comment or you can tell me now if you like that or if I should leave in the starting soon bits and you just fast forward. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do it. But we'll see. I'm about to dip again. This prescription is kicking me. No. I mean, do what you got to do, Coco. I thank you and appreciate you for being here any amount of time. So thank you again. And we will continue. I think I want to try to get through chapter 10 today, hopefully. I did read 4 chapters the first time. So technically, if I read the same, I would only be reading the next chapter and then stop. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Or maybe I'll read 8 and 9 and then stop. I don't know. People hated pretty much everything when I did read streams that I uploaded to YouTube. Hope your comments are kinder. Aw, I hope so. The first one hasn't gone up yet, but I don't really get too many comments on my YouTube videos anyway, so I'm not super worried about it, but hopefully they're all good. Hopefully they're all good. I don't think I've ever received a bad one. They're mostly like bots. They're mostly just bots commenting. Or like, what's it called? Like promoting things. How dare they? You have a relaxing voice. I know. Tara really does, though. I always fall asleep to Tara streams, even though they are typically very late for me, so it makes sense. People come out for reading streams. They do. They must. They must. That's where all the gossip is, apparently. Apparently. I should probably take another hydration break as well before we start the next chapter. If they want it done differently, then they should read it themselves. I mean, facts, Coco. Facts. Straight up facts. Okay. Let me just check one thing really quick. I hate notifications on my phone. I always have to look at them to make them go away. So I'm just quickly getting rid of some notifications. They get mad at the pace and they get mad that I respond to people in chat. I know, like that was the one thing I wasn't sure how I should do is like talking with chat. I really like how V does in between chapters. So that kind of makes sense. If it wasn't a live stream, I think it would just be, you know, the book reading and then that was it. But, and I thought about doing that too, of just doing a recording and just uploading it to YouTube instead of doing it via Twitch. But I really like the kind of interactive and like talking about the book. If, you know, if people decide to talk about the story while I'm reading, I don't know. I don't know what people want to do or why they listen, but I think it's extra fun as a live stream too. So that's what I decided to end up doing. But yeah. They get mad I take a couple of minutes between chapters to hydrate too. Man, these freaking people throws hands. Yeah, for real. Like if you're coming onto the internet to listen to a book and you don't want to hear chatting in amongst the book, then just get an audiobook. That's what it's for. That's the separation, you know? But people are going to be people and people are going to hate about everything. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Oh, I had to get a yawn out. All right. Chapter 8, Explorations. Dune had taken to wandering the pipeworks alone. He would go to his assigned tunnel and do his job quickly. Once you got good at using your wrenches and brushes and tubes of glue, it wasn't hard. Most of the workers did their jobs quickly and then gathered in little groups to play cards or have salamander races or just talk and sleep. But Dune didn't care about any of that. If he was going to be stuck in the pipeworks, he would at least not waste the time he had. Since the long blackout, everything seemed more urgent than ever. Whenever the lights flickered, he was afraid the ancient generator might be shuddering to a permanent halt. So while the others lounged around, he headed out towards the edges of the pipeworks to see what he could see. Pay attention, his father had said. And that's what he did. He followed his map when he could, but in some places the map was unclear. There were even tunnels that didn't show up on the map at all. To keep from getting lost, he dropped a trail of things as he walked, washers, bolts, pieces of wire, whatever he had in his tool belt, and then he picked them up on his way back. His father had been at least a little bit right. There were interesting things in the pipeworks if you paid attention. Already he had found 3 new crawling creatures: a black beetle the size of a pinhead, a moth with furry wings, and the best of all, a creature with a soft, shiny body and a small spiral pattern shell on its back. Just after he found this one, while he was sitting on the floor watching in fascination as the creature crept up his arm, a couple of workers came by and saw him. They burst into laughter. "It's Bug Boy," one of them said. "He's collecting bugs for his lunch." Enraged, Dune jumped up and shouted at them. His sudden motion made the creature fall off his arm and to the ground, and Dune felt a crunch beneath his foot. The laughing workers didn't notice. They tossed a few more taunts at him and walked on, but Dune knew instantly what he'd done. He lifted his foot and looked at the squash mess underneath. Unintended consequences, he thought miserably. He was angry at his anger, the way it surged up and took over. He picked the bits of shell and goo off the sole of his boot and thought, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. In the days that followed, Dune went farther and farther into the pipeworks, holding on to the hope that he might find something not only interesting but important. But what he found didn't seem important at all. Once he came upon an old pair of pliers that someone had dropped and left behind. Twice he found a coin. He discovered a supply closet that appeared to have been completely forgotten, but all it held were some boxes of plugs and washers and a rusty box containing shriveled bits of what must once have been someone's lunch. He found another supply closet at the far south end of the pipeworks. At least he assumed that's what it was. It was at the end of a tunnel with a rope strung across it. A sign hanging from the rope said, "Caved in, no entry." Dune entered anyway, ducking under the rope. He found no sign of a cave-in, but there were no lights. He groped his way forward for 20 steps or so, and there the tunnel ended in a securely locked door. He couldn't see it, but he felt it. He retraced his steps, ducked back under the rope again, and walked on. A short distance away, he found a hatch in the ceiling of the tunnel. A square wooden panel that must lead, he thought, up into the storerooms. If he'd had something to stand on, he could have reached it and tried to open it, but it was about a foot above his upstretched hand. Probably it was locked anyway. He wondered if the builders had used openings like this during one of the constructions of the city to get more easily from one place to another. On days when his job was near the main tunnel, he sometimes walked along the river after he'd finished working. He stayed away from the east end, where the generator was. He didn't want to think about the generator. Instead, he went the other way, toward the place where the river rushed out of the pipeworks. The path grew less level at this end and less smooth. The river here was bordered with clumps of wrinkled rock that seemed to grow out of the ground like fungus. Dune liked to sit on these clumps, running his finger along the strange creases and crevices that must have been carved somehow by running or dripping water. In some places there were grooves that looked almost like writing. But as for the things of importance, Dune found none. It seemed that the pipeworks was no use after all to a person who wanted to save the city. The generator was hopeless. He would never understand electricity. He used to think he could use electricity to invent a movable light if he studied hard enough. He took apart light bulbs, he took apart the electric outlets on the wall to see how the wires inside wound together, and in the process got a painful vibrating jolt all through his body. But when he tried to wind wires of his own together in exactly the same way, nothing happened. It was what came through the wires that made the light, he finally understood, and he had no idea what that was. Now he could see only two courses of action. He could give up and do nothing, or he could start to work on a different kind of movable light. Dune didn't want to give up, so on his day off one Thursday, he went to the Ember library to look up fire. The library occupied an entire building on one side of Bilbolio Square. Its door was at the end of a short passage in the middle of the building. Dune went down the passage, pushed open the door, and walked in. No one was there except for the librarian, Ancient Edward Pocket, who sat behind his desk writing something with a tiny pencil clutched in his gnarled hand. The library had two big rooms, one for fiction, which was stories people made up out of their own imaginations, and the other for fact, which was information about the real world. The walls of both rooms were lined with shelves, and on most of the shelves were hundreds of packets of pages. Each packet was held together with stout loops of string. The packets leaned against each other at angles and lay in untidy stacks. Some were thick and some were so slim that only a clip was needed to hold them together. The pages of the oldest packets were yellowed and warped, and their edges were uneven rows of ripples. These were the books of Ember, written over years by its citizens. They contained in their loose, close-written pages much that was imagined and everything that was known. Edward Pocket looked up and nodded briefly at Dune, one of his most frequent visitors. Dune nodded back. He went into the fact room to the section of the shelves labeled F. The books were arranged by subject, but even so, it wasn't easy to find what you wanted. A book about moths, for instance, might be under M for moths, or I for insects, or B for bugs. It might even be under F for flying things. Usually you had to browse through the entire library to make sure you found all the books on one subject. But since he was looking for fire, he thought he might as well start with F. Fire was rare in Ember. When there was a fire, it was because there had been an accident. Someone had left a dish towel too close to an electric burner on a stove, or a cord had frayed and a spark had flown out and ignited curtains. Then the citizens would rush in with buckets of water, and the fire was quickly drowned. But it was, of course, possible to start a fire on purpose. You could hold a sliver of wood to the stove burner until it burst into flame, and then for a moment it would flare brightly, giving off an orange light. The trick was to find a way to make the light last. If you had a light that would keep going, you could go out into the unknown regions and see what was there. Finding a way to explore the unknown regions was the only thing Dune could think of to do. He took down a book from the F shelf. Fungus, it was called. He put it back. The next book was called How to Repair Furniture. He put that back too. He went through foot diseases, fun with string, coping with failure, and canned fruit recipes before he finally found a book called All About Fire. He sat down at one of the library's square tables to read it. But the person who had written the book knew no more about fire than Dune. Mostly, the book described the dangers of fire. A long section of it was about a building in Winifred Square that had caught fire 40 years ago, and how all of its doors and all of its furniture had burned up and smoke had filled the air for days. Another part was about what to do if your oven caught on fire. Dune closed the book and sighed. It was useless. He could write a better book than that. He got up and wandered restlessly around the library. Sometimes you could just find useful things just by choosing randomly from the shelves. He had done this many times, just reached out and grabbed something, in the hope that by accident he might come upon the very piece of information he needed. It would be something that another person had written down without understanding its significance, just a sentence or two that would be like a flash of light in Dune's mind, fitting together with things he already knew to make a solution to everything. Although he'd often found something interesting in these searches, he never found anything important. Today was no different. He did come across a collection called Mysterious Words from the Past, which he read for a while. It was about words and phrases so old that their meanings had been forgotten. He read a few pages. Heavens above indicates surprise. What heavens means is unclear. It might be another word for floodlight. Hogwash means nonsense, though no one knows what a hog is or why one would wash it. Battling 1,000 indicates great success. This might possibly refer to killing bugs. All in the same boat means all in the same predicament. The meaning of boat is unknown. Interesting, but not useful. He put the book back on the shelf and was about to leave when the door of the library opened and Lena Mayfleet came in. End of chapter 8. I feel like these chapters are a lot shorter. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. But we have been reading for an hour and a half. What is a boat, really? YouTube comments are just a mean bunch for those, for the most part. I hate thinking about the generator, Misty. Like, dang YouTube negative comment people. I'm making people aware of these books. Heck, some others have told me that they went out and bought the books I've shown because they didn't know about it before. So you're welcome. I'm not making money for it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Some even get mad on behalf of the publishers. Like, what gives you the right to do this? Me. Claps for chapter 8. Thank you. These are, I'm glad that we're, oh, hi, Luna. Luna's here. Luna's also listening. I wonder if I can get her to sit in my lap while I read. Come here. Come here. Maybe. Luna, kinda. Yeah. All right, let's see if she stays. I have a Luna. Let's see if she stays. Probably not. But she is in my lap. I jingle her collar for proof. She is here. Right? She won't say anything, though. She's very shy, even though the camera's not on. I wonder if she can tell. I wonder if she can tell, just like, if the camera's on or if I'm recording. Kitty. Little fluffy baby. I don't know. She seems happy enough. I'll make my lap more comfortable for her and maybe she'll stay. Or maybe she'll just run away. That works too. All right, so we're either going to read one more chapter or two more chapters, depending on how short they are. Let me quickly see. All right, it looks like 9 is a bit of a longer one. So we might just read one more. It might just be one more. So this might be the last chapter of the day, which is good. I think that'll be good. Ooh. Okay. I'm going to have one more hydration break before we start chapter 9. And the final chapter for today. Okie dokie, artichoke, and then I'll have to figure out some dinner. I will have to figure out what to eat for dinner. Because at that point, Matt might be home. Ooh, okay, ready. Chapter 9. The Dune in the Roped Off Tunnel. Or sorry, the door. The dune. It's like very cursive-y writing, so it looks like Dune. The door in the Roped Off Tunnel. Lena saw Dune immediately. He was reaching up to set a book back on its shelf. He saw her too, when he turned around and his dark eyebrows flew up in surprise as she hurried over to him. Your father told me you were here, she said. Dune, I found something. I want to show it to you. To me? Why? I think it's important. It has to do with the pipeworks. Will you come to my house and see it? Now? Dune asked. Lena nodded. Dune grabbed his old brown jacket and followed Lena out of the library and across the city to Quilliam Square. Granny's shop was closed and dark when they arrived, and so Lena was surprised when they went upstairs and saw Eveline Murdo sitting in her place by the window. Your grandmother's in her bedroom, Mrs. Murdo said. She didn't feel well, so she asked me to come. Poppy was sitting on the floor, banging a spoon on the leg of a chair. Lena introduced Dune, then led him into her room that she shared with Poppy. He looked around, and Lena felt suddenly self-conscious, seeing her room through his eyes. It was a small room with a lot crammed into it. There were 2 narrow beds, a very small table that fit into a corner, and a 4-legged stool to sit on. On the wall, clothes hung from hooks, and more clothes were strewn untidily on the floor. Beneath the window was a brown stain made by the bean seed in its pot on the windowsill. Lena had been watering it every night because she'd promised Clary she would, but it was still nothing but dirt, flat and unpromising. A couple of shelves beside the window held Lena's important possessions, the pieces of paper she collected for drawing, her pencils, a scarf with a silver thread woven through it. On the parts of the wall that had no hooks and no shelves, she had pinned up some of her pictures. What are those? Dune asked. They're from my imagination, Lena said, feeling slightly embarrassed. They're pictures of another city. Oh, you made it up? Sort of. Sometimes I dream about it. I draw too, said Dune, but I draw other kinds of things. Like what? Mostly insects, said Dune. He told her about his collection of drawings and the worm he was currently observing. To Lena, this sounded far less interesting than an undiscovered city, but she didn't say so. She led Dune over to the table. "Here's what I want to show you," she said. She lifted the metal box. Before she could reach for the papers underneath, Dune took the box and started examining it. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "It was in the closet," Lena said. She told him about Granny's wild search and about finding the box with its lid open and Poppy with paper in her mouth. As she talked, Dune turned the box over in his hands, opened and closed its lid, and peered at the latch. "There's some sort of odd mechanism here," he said. He tapped at a small metal compartment at the front of the box. "I'd like to see inside this." Here's what was in the box," Lena said, lifting the covering paper from her patchwork of scraps. "At least it's what's left of what was in there." Dune bent over, his hands on either side of the paper. Lena said, "It's called Instructions for Eggerston, or maybe Eggersman? Someone's name, anyhow. Maybe a mayor or a guard. I just call it the Instructions. I told the mayor about it. I thought maybe it was important. I wrote him a note, but he hasn't answered. I don't think he's interested." Dune said nothing. "You don't have to hold your breath," said Lena. "I glued the pieces down." "Look," she said, pointing. "This word must be pipeworks, and this one river. And look at this one, door." Dune didn't answer. His hair had fallen forward, so Lena couldn't see the expression on his face. "I thought at first," Lena went on, "that it must be instructions for how to do something. How to fix the electricity, maybe? But then I thought, what if it's instructions for going to another place?" Dune said nothing, so Lena went on. "I mean, someplace that isn't here, like another city. I think these instructions say, go down into the pipeworks and look for a door." Dune brushed the hair back from his face, but he didn't straighten up. He gazed at the broken words and frowned. "Edge," he murmured. "Small steel pan. What would that mean?" "A frying pan?" said Lena. "But I don't know why there'd be a frying pan in the pipeworks." But Dune didn't answer. He seemed to be talking to himself. He kept reading, moving a finger along the lines of words. "Open," he whispered. "Follow." Finally, he turned to look at Lena. "I think you're right," he said. "I think this is important." "Oh, I was sure you'd think so," Lena cried. She was so relieved that her words poured out in a rush. "Because you take things seriously. You told the truth to the mayor on assignment day. I didn't want to believe it, but then came the long blackout, and I knew things were as bad as you said." She stopped, breathless. She pointed to a word on the document. "This door," she said. "It has to be a door that leads out of Ember." "I don't know," said Dune. "Maybe. Or a door that leads to something important, even if that isn't." "But it must be that. What else could be important enough to lock up in a fancy box?" "Well, I suppose it could be a storage room with some special tools in it or something." A look of surprise came over his face. "Actually, I saw a door where I didn't expect to see one, out in tunnel 351. It was locked. I thought it was an old supply closet. I wonder if that could be it?" "It must be," cried Lena. Her heart sped up. "It wasn't anywhere near the river," Dune said doubtfully. "That doesn't matter," Lena said. "The river goes through the pipeworks, that's all. It's probably something like go down by the river, then go this way, then that way." "Maybe," said Dune. "It must be," Lena cried. "I know it is. It's the door that leads out of Ember." "I don't know if that makes sense," said Dune. "A door in the pipeworks could only lead to something underground. And how could that?" Lena had no patience for Dune's reasoning. She wanted to dance around the room. She was so excited. "We have to find out," she said. "We have to find out right away." Dune looked startled. "Well, I can go and try the door again," he said. "It was locked before, but I suppose—" "I want to go too," said Lena. "You want to come down into the pipeworks?" "Yes. Can you get me in?" Dune thought for a moment. "I think I can. If you come just at quitting time and wait outside the door, I'll stay out of sight until everyone has gone, and then I'll let you in. Tomorrow?" "Okay, tomorrow." Lena stopped at home the next day, only long enough to change out of her messenger's jacket, and then dashed down across the town to the pipeworks. Dune met her just outside the door, and she followed him inside, where he handed her a slicker and boots to put on. They descended the long stone stairway, and when they came out into the main tunnel, Lena stood still, staring at the river. I didn't know the river was so big, she said, after she found her voice. Yeah, said Dune. Every few years, they say someone falls in. If you fall in, there's no hope of fishing you out. The river swallows you and sweeps you away. Lena shivered. It was cold down here, a cold that she felt all the way through. Cold flesh, cold blood, cold bones. Dune led her up the path beside the water. After a while, they came to an opening in the wall, and they turned into it and left the river behind. Dune led the way through winding tunnels. Their rubber boots splashed in pools of water on the floor. Lena thought how awful it would be to work down here all day, every day. It was a creepy place, a place where it seemed people didn't belong. That black river, it was like something in a bad dream. You have to duck here, said Dune. They had come to a roped-off tunnel. But there's no light in there, Lena said. No, said Dune. We have to feel our way. It isn't far. He ducked under the rope and went in, and Lena did the same. They stepped forward into the dark. Lena kept a hand against the damp wall and placed her feet carefully. It's right here, said Dune. He had stopped a few feet ahead of Lena. She came up behind him. Put your hands out, he said. You'll feel it. Lena felt a smooth, hard surface. There was a round metal knob, and below the knob, a keyhole. It seemed an ordinary door, not at all like the entrance to a new world. But that was what made things so exciting. Nothing was ever how you expected it to be. Let's try it, she whispered. Dune took hold of the knob and twisted. Locked, he said. Is there a pan anywhere? A pan? The instructions said small steel pan. Maybe that would have the key in it. They felt around, but there was nothing, just the rocky walls. They patted the walls. They put their ears to the door. They jiggled the knob and pulled it and pushed it. Finally, Dune said, well, we can't get in. I guess we'd better go. And that was when they heard the noise. It was a scuffling, scraping noise that seemed to be coming from somewhere nearby. Lena stopped breathing. She clutched Dune's arm. Quick, Dune whispered. He made his way back toward the lighted tunnel with Lena following. They ducked under the rope and rounded a turn, then stopped, stood still, and listened. A harsh scraping sound, a thud, a pause, and then the sound of an impact, a short, explosive breath, and a muttered word in a gruff, low voice. Then slow footsteps getting closer. They flattened themselves against the wall and stood motionless. The footsteps stopped briefly, and then there was another grunt. Then the steps continued, but seemed to be fading. In a moment, from a distance, there was another sound, the chink of a key turning in a lock, and the click of a latch opening. Lena made an astonished face at Dune. Someone had gone down the roped tunnel and opened the door. She put her mouth close to Dune's ear. Shall we try to see who it is? She whispered. Dune shook his head. I don't think we should, he said. We should go. We could just peek around the corner. It was too tempting not to try. They crept forward to the place where the tunnel turned. From there, they could see the entrance to the rope tunnel. Holding their breath, they watched. And in a minute, they heard a thump and a click, the door closing, the lock turning, and footsteps once again, this time quick. A long leg stepped over the rope, and the person it belonged to turned and walked away. All they saw was his back, a dark coat, dark untidy hair. He walked with a lurching motion that struck Lena as somehow familiar. In a few seconds, he had vanished into the shadows. When they came up out of the pipeworks, they stripped off their boots and slickers and hurried out into Plumber Square, where they flopped down on a bench and burst into furious talk. Someone got there before us, said Lena. Dune said he was walking slowly when he went in, as if he was looking for something, and he walked fast when he came out, as if he found something. What was it? I can't stand not to know. Dune jumped up. He paced back and forth in front of the bench. But how did he get the key? He asked. Did he find instructions like the ones you found? And how did he get into the pipeworks? I don't think he works there. There's something familiar about the way he walks, said Lena, but I don't know why. Well, anyhow, he opened that door and we can't, said Dune. If it does go somewhere, if it does lead out of Ember, he'll be telling the whole city pretty soon. He'll be a hero. Dune sat down again. If he's found the way out, we'll be glad, of course, he said glumly. It doesn't matter who finds it, as long as it helps the city. That's right, Lena said. It's just that I thought we were going to find it, said Dune. Yeah, Lena said, thinking how grand it would have been to stand before all of Ember announcing their discovery. They sat without talking for a while, lost in their own thoughts. A man pulling a cart full of wood scraps went by. A woman leaned from a lighted window on Grappery Street and called out to some boys playing in the square below. A couple of guards in their red and brown uniforms ambled across the square, laughing. The town clock rang out 6 deep booms that Lena could feel like shudders beneath her ribs. Dune said, I guess what we do now is wait to see if there's an announcement. I guess so, said Lena. Maybe that door is nothing special at all, Dune said. Maybe it's just an old, unused supply closet. But Lena wasn't ready to believe that. Maybe it wasn't the door out of Ember, but it was a mystery nevertheless. A mystery connected, she was sure, to the bigger mystery that they were trying to solve. End of chapter 9.